Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Francis Seeley from both Robonet21 and a local group called Enfield Climate Action Forum. And today we're doing this webinar interview because in a few days' time, April the 21st to the 24th, there are going to be a number of events and a big demonstration in the centre of London where citizens are going to demand, we hope, that we can find a way out of the climate change and ecological crisis and the cost of living crisis as well, because in a way they are increasingly being related and they interact together. And we've got with us today Jason Chrysostomou. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I probably haven't. You have to correct me if I haven't. But Jason is involved in developing and helping to get this demonstration together, particularly from the local area in which I live in North London. So welcome, Jason, for joining us today. And maybe we can start by asking you if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're concerned about climate change.
Right, yes. So it's my name's Jason Chrysostomou. I know it's not an easy one to say, but I live in Palmer's Green. So I grew up in the area in Enfield. I work in digital technology. And like many people, I was aware of global warming from a young age, learning a bit about it in school, on TV, and so on. But I only really became aware of it as the emergency situation that it is about maybe 8 years ago. There are these big IPCC reports, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, leading scientists around the world that come together and make this assessment reports on the state of the climate. And so I started reading a bit more about, getting into the science. And was absolutely terrified by it all. The most recent IPCC report was a couple of months ago, last year. And they forecast that we're heading towards over 3 degrees of warming by the end of the century with current policies. And we know that 1.5 degrees is going to be catastrophic for many people around the world, especially around the equator. So it really sunk in just how serious the situation was. Also the ecological destruction as well, loss of species and biodiversity loss. And then in around 2018, Extinction Rebellion came about. And I went along to their first big events in central London. And I saw people blocking streets and gluing themselves to things, and thought, okay, this is something new. And there are other people out there that understand the gravity of the situation. So yeah, that's when I got involved basically and formed this local group in Enfield.
Okay, well, I mean, the dangers of climate change we've known about really from the 1970s. Well, when I say we know, governments and corporations knew, and from the late 1980s, everyone began to know, but things haven't happened, have they, as fast as we would want them to in order to address the climate change emergency. And is that what this demonstration, the big one it's called, later in April, is all about? I mean, could you briefly, without going in detail, because we'll go into it a bit more, briefly, is that what it's about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a recognition that we are, we're not making the progress we need, and so this is an attempt to create the biggest ever climate protest so far. 100,000 people outside Parliament for over 4 days, and it's a coalition. The thing to stress here, it's a coalition event. Extinction Rebellion are organizing it, but there are over 70 other supporting organizations behind it. So we can talk more about it later, I think, the details, right?
Okay. I mean, do you think it's because, we're in an imminent emergency, that if we don't do things this decade, then we've got a catastrophic future? Is that what makes it necessary?
Yes. So so Antonio Gutierrez, the head of the United Nations, has said that we have a narrowing window of opportunity left to ensure a livable future, and the UN don't see a credible pathway to 1.5 degrees anymore. to keeping temperature rises. So we already have catastrophic effects locked in now. It's a question of how bad are things going to get after that. And the solution can't come from us as in just individuals making lifestyle changes. We need far-reaching, deep policy, regulation, investment changes at national, international levels. And the only way to get that is to force governments to do so. And so that's why these kinds of events are necessary.
I mean, it's quite interesting what you say, because often we've been fed that if we make lifestyle changes, that's fine. And corporation and governments love that, because that sort of prevents them to take the action that they should. And I suppose the action that we should take, and I guess it's one that you'll be talking about in the demonstration, is number one, is to phase out fossil fuels. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a necessary part of it. But I would say that, you know, we have all the kind of technical solutions really to this problem. And that involves solutions to all different sectors of the economy. Energy being one, but there's also, we need policies for, you know, for agriculture, transport, construction, housing, all these things. So the most urgent task really is one that I would like to say, put the emphasis on us. So the urgent task for us is to join this movement. This is the only way out of this problem.
I mean, the government has a plan to limit carbon emissions and so on, to move to net zero, but many people are arguing that's not going to happen. And all the things that you're talking about that should be done are not being done fast enough. I mean, do you have any view about why that is the case? Why isn't it happening fast enough when the emergency is so obvious?
Yeah, because I think it's a reflection of power structures in society. You know, there are significant flaws with our political system. It's we have 5-year election cycles, so everything is geared towards short-termism. We have politicians tend to be come from the same class of society, a very kind of narrow circle. They're not ordinary people, you know, representative ordinary people. And obviously there's a lot of lobbying, think tanks, and funding by billionaires that they fund political parties, election campaigns. And I think it's a representation of all of that, and the concentration of power in our economy as well. The oil industry is huge. They make huge profits and they want to continue doing so. So I think it's all of that, you know, the logic of our economic system as well, combined together has resulted in action not being taken that's needed.
So do you think that the government's plans to still drill for oil in the North Sea, and the fact that its carbon budget delivery plan will not meet the targets in 2030 that the Paris Agreement hoped it would, is because of those pressures? I mean, for example, there are more subsidies going to fossil fuels than have ever gone to renewables. And is that the sort of problem we have to face?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I mean, the IPCC have said that we need to halve global emissions by 2030. And that's 7 years away. And emissions are going up every year. They went up again last year. And to get anywhere close to, you know, to that target, it means a drastic, radical reduction in emissions now. And we're nowhere near that. And of course, the UK, we have a huge historical responsibility as well, because we started the Industrial Revolution and we put lots of emissions up before even other countries even began doing so. I think it's good to put that into perspective.
I mean, one of the sort of insightful things that you said was that the way government is controlled, the lobbying that goes on, what influences government, and the demonstration or the events that are taking place from April the 21st are also about citizen democracy, aren't they? A new way of doing things. That's
right. So what we are what we are demanding is to let the people decide, essentially. And to do that, there is something called a citizens' assembly, which shall I describe a bit now what that is?
Go ahead.
Okay, so citizens' assembly is something that's been used effectively in other parts of the world. And it is a decision-making body made up of a cross-section of the population who are randomly selected based on, demographics. So a proportion of people from different backgrounds, based on gender, age, ethnicity, income, and so on. They come together, and they're paid to do this. And over a period of time, over months, could be 100, 150 people, similar to a jury system. But they come together and they listen to experts, independent experts. They get trained in critical thinking, and then they deliberate, and then they arrive at solutions to a particular problem. And that's what we are kind of advocating for as the way to deal with this emergency.
I mean, do you favor that approach to, for example, referenda, a series of referendums where all the population is involved? Is deliberation, the deliberative approach, important to come to a conclusion?
Yes, I think that's the crucial aspect to it. I guess, it requires being informed. And as we know, with referenda, you're depending on the information available is very dependent on how functioning the media system is in delivering good quality information and so on. And the advantage of a citizens' assembly is it is deliberative. People sit together, they get good quality, independent information. And it was used successfully, for example, in Ireland on the abortion issue. And there's really great information on the Extinction Rebellion website if people want to look a bit more deeply into what a citizens' assembly is.
Okay, but the government might say that we are planning to do things. We are going to hype up nuclear power. We're going to develop carbon capture, and even today, Shell says it's putting money into carbon capture. Is that a way forward, or is that a way of delaying what has to really be done?
The most recent IPCC report, there's a synthesis chapter that came out just a few weeks ago, and with recommendations to governments. And in there, it clearly says that carbon capture is not a proven technology at mass scale. We cannot depend on it. And in fact, the cheapest forms of energy are solar and wind. And so it's very clear what the solution is. And the government clearly, they want to continue the status quo here. They want to continue the oil industry and the huge profits that they make. But the science absolutely does not support their policy, their strategy.
I mean, I guess the argument that people make who want to move to renewables is that nuclear energy and carbon capture is expensive and takes a long, long time, and we've only got a short time to make a difference. So in a way, you could argue, couldn't you, that it's just government and businesses saying we've got to sort of greenwash, we've got to find a way of carrying on as business as usual and convincing people that will work. But as you say, the science is suggesting that if we don't take action now, then temperatures by the end of the century won't rise by 1.5 to 2, but they might rise by 3 to 4. And that's the problem we face, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The current modeling that I've looked at recently, the probability is that we will reach 1.5 degrees by 2030. That's only 7 years away, and 2 degrees by mid-century. And so we're really in a situation where the next few years are going to decide the fate of human civilization. It's heavy stuff, and it's a very uncomfortable truth to really come to terms with, but that's where we are now.
So what is the demonstration? What do you think you will be demanding? And not demanding so much, because if you have an assembly or a series of assemblies, it's a deliberative forum. But are you suggesting that we move towards complete renewables, changes in the way we have our lifestyles? Yes, what we eat, how we transport, how we build, how we insulate. It's a whole series of things. And that is really big to get people's minds around, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. It really is a whole package of things, like you said. I mean, some people call it a Green New Deal, which comes from Roosevelt's stimulus program in the US. But something along those lines, a huge investment program to decarbonize all sectors of the economy. One that I think receives a bit less attention, but is also very important, is agriculture. It contributes to, depending on the different ways of calculating, but 15 to 30% of emissions. And it's unsustainable for 8 billion people to continue eating so much meat and dairy, for example, and we need to transition to a plant-based diet. So it's big stuff, and we've had 30-40 years to try and have a smooth transition plan, which was very possible, but now it's really is the time factor.
Okay, so this demonstration, these events are happening from the 21st. So tell us about them day by day. On day one, which is Friday week, tell us what's happening on that day.
Right. So Friday will be pickets outside government buildings. So it's all going to be happening in the area south of the House of Parliament, different locations, different government buildings. So we'll be outside, and there will be flags and color and music and talks and activities. It will be a family-friendly event, very inclusive. So that's Friday, kicking things off right in the morning.
And then Saturday?
So Saturday is Earth Day. So there'll be a big march. So yeah, come along in costumes if you like. Yep, so that's Saturday. And so should I say about Sunday and Monday?
Well, Sunday's quite interesting, isn't it? Because the London Marathon is on then, and you've got some link up with that. So tell us a bit about that.
That's right. So the London Marathon's on Sunday, and we have coordinated with them to make this work. And it will be an opportunity for publicity, essentially. The cameras will be on us, and you'll be able to talk to lots of people who will be there.
I mean, what way are you coordinating? That's quite interesting how you're doing it. How will it link in with the marathon?
So there are different teams in Extinction Rebellion called circles, and they have different responsibilities. So the logistics team are dealing with that, which I'm not on myself, but I've been told it's all been organized to work together. I think we're going to be in the area essentially south of Parliament, and the London Marathon doesn't go there. So that's been intentionally organized so that, yeah.
Okay, and then finally you come to Monday, the final day. What happens then?
Yep. So Monday again, Parliament returns. So there will be, again, pickets outside different government buildings, and we will be presenting the government with our demand for a citizens' assembly, a democratic process to come up with a solution to this emergency, and for them to implement it, not to ignore it, which is the danger.
So what happens after that? I mean, if government says no to a citizens' assembly, I mean, where do we go from there?
Well, I think this is a very significant step in the process of making this a coalition and a movement that all organizations join. So it's that in itself is extremely significant, where we build relationships with each other, we connect, and we invite people to come along who might not, have any experience with activism, to come along and, as we say, to unite to survive. Now that's what and so I believe that I still believe that we can do something about this, and it's just a question of becoming big enough and reaching the tipping point, the social tipping point, where we cannot be ignored.
There is, tipping point's an interesting term, isn't it? We talk about tipping points in terms of climate. We may have a tipping point which releases methane from permafrost and so on, and that will create a cycle of climate change catastrophe. But there are tipping points in culture, aren't there? There are points in which people can say very quickly, we've got to do something. And are you confident that we can do something quickly enough, or we've got to wait for a crisis? And if we wait for a crisis for changes to happen, won't that be too late?
Yeah. One of the big challenges with this issue is the time lag factor, that you put emissions up today, but the temperature rises later, 10, 20 years later. So you don't feel the impacts until later. That was always going to be the big challenge with this. And things, the changes in our climate aren't going to happen in a linear fashion. They're going to happen exponentially. And we're at the beginning of that curve now. So we're going to see in the next few years an acceleration of climate impacts. And I do think more people will start to really panic about this as it becomes clearer what it means. So I think we need to be ready to absorb over the next few years all these people who really get what's happening, and hope that it's not too late. Really.
Yeah, so is one way of doing that is saying climate change is not in the future, it's happening now. And to talk about the impacts it's having on us already, like health, for example. Climate change accelerates pollution in society. Pollution creates ill health. So we look at health, we look at cost of living, we look at the fact that climate change will impact on our cost of living if we don't reorganize the way we produce our goods and produce our food. And migration will increase because of climate change. And if we don't have a strategy for that, that will cause internal conflict. So should we be really focusing on the issues that are affecting us now and saying, we've got to deal with these now because these are imminent, but they're also the ones that are going to get worse in the future. In other words, we've got to do something that's relevant to the people out there. They've got to feel a connection with the message.
Yeah. I think obviously the very hot temperatures we faced last summer, the 40 degrees, that definitely had an impact. I've been doing outreach for a number of years now on this, doing stalls and talking to people. And I can definitely see a shift over the last year or so because people are directly experiencing now these high temperatures, the drought, the cost of living going up, and that's only going to continue. The forecast in terms of the huge number of people that are going to be displaced around the equator is going to be a huge issue now. At 2 degrees, I think the prediction is that there will be 1 billion people displaced. That's 1/8 of the population, and civilization can't handle that. So, it's serious stuff, isn't it?
And in the UK, some of the estimates I've seen is that even 4 million people in the UK will have to relocate because of rising sea levels. So we've got to make people realize it affects them here and now as well, haven't we? That it's not something out there in the developing world, it's happening to us as well.
Yes.
Okay, well, you're obviously doing a lot to actually encourage people, which is great. So if people want to get involved in this demonstration, these events, and they want to get involved, how would they go about it? Where would they make contact?
Right. So I would direct people to extinctionrebellion.uk. So on there, you can sign up to signal that you're coming along. I think about 25,000 people have already done so. And there's lots of information there about the event and also all the things I've been describing, such as the Citizens Assembly, and also a bit about, the idea of non-violent civil disobedience as being historically shown to be an effective way to bring about social change. And then just turn up. You can come along for all 4 days, which would be great. But if you can't come along to whichever days you can, bring your friends and family. It's, I think it's going to be amazing. Feel quite positive about it all. And then after that, you can also, if you live in Enfield and you want to get involved with our local Extinction Rebellion group, then we also, sign up to our newsletter, and we have a basic webpage up called xrenfield.uk.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that. I mean, I think, you're doing a great job in actually motivating people and getting them involved. I mean, we've got to do lots of things locally. We've got to change lifestyles. We've got to do all sorts of things. But the demonstrations, I think, are also equally important because it's such an imminent danger that we face that we've got to take whatever action we can. Many people argue that government now is not doing it. It's down to people, and people have got to find the solution. And doing it the way you're doing it, I think, is a very, very important step in actually getting people aware, and not just aware, but actually involved and engaged to carry on afterwards. And so carrying afterwards is as important as having the events on the 4 days themselves. We've got to do that. So, thank you for doing that and telling us about it and telling us about the background as well, because that's been really important. And I hope a lot of people will be involved. So thanks, Jason. And we'll end this interview now.